So I follow this Substack. So I guess it's called The Forgotten Side of Medicine. That's its official name, but it's the Midwestern Doctor. I follow the Twitter account too. Why isn't there a cure for insomnia?
There's not.
No.
Michael Jackson cured it permanently.
Permanently. So get this. There is a cure for it.
Okay.
But just like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, they're keeping it from you. In 1964, a sleeping medication hit the market that was remarkably effective for a variety of conditions, including insomnia. So that wasn't just the only thing it treated, but it really treated insomnia. And how do I know about this? Because I quit smoking pot and I couldn't sleep for months. And I found out about this drug that actually does cure insomnia, but they made it illegal. That's the story here. I won't bury the lead. And hence profoundly improve the health of its recipients. Because it threatened so many different drug markets, once it reached America in 1990, the FDA, in collusion with the media, launched a 10-year takedown of it, which in many regards was almost identical to what they did to ivermectin.
And they approved Appeal, by the way, the fake crap they sprayed.
It was successful, and very few people are even aware that this drug exists, or that the many of sleeping disorders we face are easily treatable. While most of the sleeping medications are unsafe and ineffective drugs that are best avoided, one actually worked and frequently produced miraculous. It's called gamma GHB.
They did it like they did with Gaddafi and Saddam. They draw a raping drug.
The most apparent benefit of this drug was that it was powerful and consistent sleep aid that immediately put the recipient deep into the sleep cycle, resulting in the benefits of those cycles being restored for many who had previously lost them, and the individual waking up feeling completely refreshed and energized. The stuff they give you now doesn't give you the deep restorative sleep.
Do you know who?
But this does.
It was bodybuilders.
Well, that's coming up.
Okay.
Furthermore, it frequently could allow people to feel fully refreshed after just a 3 or 4 hour sleep, and was unlikely to be addictive and did not suppress the reticular activation system. I don't know what your balls have to do with it. And dramatically increased the level of growth hormone. For example, 2.4 grams given intravenously in 30 minutes caused a 16-fold increase in GH levels. As growth hormone heals and repairs the body, but it greatly declines with age. You lose growth hormone as you get older. This resulted in many previously frail elderly patients on GHB having significantly increased strength, stamina, muscle mass, and function, while in younger patients, significantly improvement was seen in their healing from musculoskeletal injuries. It produced remarkable results in the treatment of a variety of addictions, particularly opioids and alcohol and benzodiazepines, along with helping mitigate withdrawals from each of these substances. Conversely, GHB was not addictive. So it seems like another wonder drug that they got rid of. It increased dopamine levels within the substantia nigra, thereby counteracting the effects of Parkinson's disease. It aided childbirth by relaxing the mother, dilating the cervix, and protecting the fetus from respiratory depression. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It had a variety of aphrodisiac effects, such as making people much more comfortable with sexual intimacy, dramatically increasing their sensitivity to touching or being touched, improving male erectile capacity and premature ejaculation, and increasing capacity for female orgasms. Helping the individuals address subjects they are otherwise inhibited from exploring during therapy, thereby allowing therapeutic breakthroughs to happen. GHB was also found to be particularly helpful for couples therapy, having a disinhibiting effect like alcohol, but making individuals friendlier rather than aggressive. It temporarily helped with anxiety, but without many of the side effects seen with benzodiazepines. Similarly, in France, it was frequently used by students who had to pass an exam or give a public presentation. Given these remarkable benefits and the decades of research supporting its use, why has no one ever heard of it?
We all heard of it. It was called the date rape drug.
It's because it's the ivermectin of sleep medicine.
But Rohypnol was initially the
Let me get to this.
Oh.
In the case of GHB in the early 1990s, it began entering the U.S. as a supplement, largely due to bodybuilders as you mentioned, recognizing the value of its increasing growth hormone in the body. Before long, the FDA decided they needed to stop it and became very interested in publicizing the adverse reactions that occurred to it, and in no time discovered 57 calls to poison control about it, which the CDC heavily publicized, including 9 which resulted in ICU admissions, but 0 of which were fatal. So just like they did that bullshit with ivermectin, oh, they're getting all these calls.
Gunshot people can't get help. Because of all the blind.
This, in turn, is very similar to the epidemic of poison control calls for ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine deaths we saw throughout COVID-19, all of which were later shown to be a hoax. For example, the photos of people lining up in the ERs that were supposedly overloaded with ivermectin poisonings were actually old images of individuals lining up for COVID-19 vaccines. So how did they get rid of it? Well, the FDA in 1990 gave out this press release. And here's what the press release says. The Food and Drug Administration today warned consumers to discontinue the use of an illegally marketed drug, GHB, or gamma hydroxybutyric acid, that has been promoted as a legal psychedelic, but has caused more than 30 people in California, Florida, and Georgia to become ill with symptoms ranging from nausea and vomiting to severe respiratory problems, seizures, and coma. The FDA offered consumers the following medical advice. Anyone taking GHB outside of physician-supervised clinical trials should stop immediately. Anyone who has consumed GHB and is experiencing seizures, uncontrolled shaking, headache, unexplained drowsiness, or other central nervous system disorders, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea should consult their physician immediately. Physicians treating patients exhibiting these conditions should report these cases to their local poison control center, and according to the California Health Department, GHB is sold through mail order outlets, health food stores, bodybuilding gyms, and fitness centers. It is marketed as powder or granules. Then, on the basis of the authority bestowed by this press release, which was full of deceptive inaccuracies, the FDA banned GHB in the country, threatened compounding pharmacies into no longer supplying it, and began raiding people who were supplying it, which they did not have the legal authority to do.
Freeze, FDA.
Yeah.
What?
Many of these arrests eventually went to the courts, where the FDA engaged in a series of highly unscrupulous tactics. For example, when attempting to prosecute individuals for supplying GHB, they argued that there was no evidence GHB had any valid use or had any evidence of safety, but simultaneously, they refused to let the courts admit the decades of evidence arguing otherwise, or the fact that there were 15 investigational new drug applications which had been submitted to them for GHB, each of which indicated a lot of that evidence actually existed. So that's where they were lying again. Isn't that something? Because of how egregious the FDA's tactics were, and for example, prosecutorial misconduct, withholding evidence from the defense, lacking a legal basis for the prosecution, entrapment, or illegal searches and seizures, the higher courts gradually sided with the defendants and began overturning the convictions.
Wow.
The FDA, in turn, switched to trying to persuade the state legislatures to outlaw GHB, as politically it was not possible for the FDA to do so at a federal level. As Rohypnol, this is what you were talking about, Roofies, had recently entered the United States, and fear was beginning to build over its use as a date rape drug, since it both made the recipient unable to resist the assault and likely to forget it. The fear of Roofies was juxtaposed onto GHB.
I remember being confused, like, wait, there's 2?
Yeah. But guess which one got banned? GHB, not roofies.
You can still get roofies. Then why was Cosby using Benadryl?
Here we go. In turn, the media began trumpeting that America was facing a wave of rapes from a silent, odorless, colorless drug that made one helpless to resist or even remember sexual assault.
In movies nonstop.
In parallel, these likely focus group tested words began flooding those stories about GHB. Dangerous, potentially lethal, hallucinogenic, addictive, illegal, designer, date rape drug. Note, Rohypnol was able to avoid later bans GHB faced because its manufacturer successfully lobbied for it to be left alone.
Designer drug, I've heard that term for many years.
Yeah.
Which drug is not designed?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Before long, a few young women were identified who had been date raped while on the drug and then died afterward from the drug side effects. The media did all that it could to fan the hysteria. For example, some articles from Time magazine. A lot of people, GHB users, have heart attacks, go into cardiac arrest, said Sergeant Michael Lewis. These are from those articles. GHB, the new backroom drug on the party scene, can kill without warning, said CNN. GHB slows breathing, cuts off oxygen. A blackout can be brief, can be forever, says CNN.
That's what Oxycontin that was legal does?
Yeah. No, one of the most extraordinary ones was in the Tennessee Bar Association publishing an alleged affidavit from the medical examiner who performed Elvis's autopsy, claiming that GHB killed him. Although once questioned, they stated it was just an academic exercise.
What, to lie about Elvis?
I guess so. Using this fear campaign, the FDA gradually convinced individual states to ban it. And in 2000, in honor of 2 GHB victims, Congress passed the Hillary J. Farias and Samantha Reed Date Rape Drug Prohibition Act of 2000.
Oh, you name it after someone, it's a bullshit law.
The law made GHB a Schedule 1 drug, whereas cocaine, for example, is a Schedule 2 drug, thereby bypassing the protections GHB had from the 1994 DSHEA Act, as GHB is produced naturally within your body and found in small amounts within meat and wine.
Oh my God, is my body a drug dealer designing drugs?
Remarkably, however, the emergency law also included a special exemption for a pharmaceutical preparation of GHB, which was instead made a Schedule 3 drug, which violates the entire basis for the scheduling, as something can only be Schedule 1 if there is no acceptable medical use for it. So they completely contradicted themselves. Well, there's no medical use, except we're going to say there is.
It's like they knew everyone's a moron that wouldn't do their own research.
That's exact. No, the scheduling also made it very difficult to conduct future research.
Oh, thank God.
On the drug. In looking at these events, there are 3 important things to take note of. First, the entire epidemic was made up of a safety database used for monitoring these types of things, found that GHB accounted for less than 0.1% of drugs mentioned in emergency department room reports. Less than 0.1%.
Tylenol kills more than all those drugs.
Yep. In 2006, after the English police examined 120 cases of sexual assault, they determined 119 of them involved alcohol.
No, what do you know?
Out of 120, 119 involved alcohol. 57 had taken an illegal or controlled prescription drug, for example, cocaine, and only 2 had received GHB, which may or may not have played a role in the assault. In 2010, literature review determined that GHB had been detected in between 0.2 and 4.4% of reported sexual assaults, and hence was not causing the rape epidemic the media's hysteria had suggested. It didn't make any sense, as GHB was very salty.
Yeah.
And it was hence easy to taste.
It was
rather than being a stealth rape drug, especially after a dose which could be sufficient to sedate someone. So you would taste it.
Odorless and tasteless.
Yeah. If GHB actually was an effective date rape drug, the last thing you would want to do would be to widely advertise it to potential rapists.
Well, unless I'm doing a lot of rape reports and I make my money that way.
Most of the claims made about GHB overtly contradicted the decades of research on it. For example, minor muscle movements made on the drug were labeled as seizures, despite EEG studies repeatedly showing they were not accompanied by seizure motion in the brain, while the brief deep sleep it caused was labeled as comas. In lieu of evidence, the media unquestionably repeated the government's talking points. Let me say that again. In lieu of evidence, the media unquestionably repeated the government's talking points. When has something like that ever happened before? I don't know.
Was the problem before COVID even started? Hey, they got one move. It's called the old Reefer Madness.
Yep.
And guess what happens with Reefer Madness? Rape.
That's rape.
The same as Saddam Hussein, and they always go to that one. Oh, Julian Assange. They got one smear.
Finally, each widely publicized GHB victim, none of whom were ever sexually assaulted,
So you just made that up.
had a story inconsistent with GHB being their cause of death, alongside clear cause of death besides GHB. For example, blood clot in the heart and a family's history of fatal heart defects.
Would they get a booster too with the GHB?
This includes the 2 date rape victims the act that outlawed GHB was named after. Likewise,
Bravo.
the small number
Bravo.
of case reports that were used to portray GHB as dangerous presented a very weak case that it was. In contrast, large numbers of victims exist for many of lucrative drugs on the market, but we never hear about them because their manufacturers sponsor both the media and the political class.
Wow. So you've been fucked the whole time.
Their whole time.
It wasn't a new thing. I'm actually glad about the whole COVID thing because at least now you could see. Because the GHB thing, I mean, I've done so many drugs in my life. I never did that one. I guess it was done by the time I did drugs, it wasn't around. But it really is amazing to me how much reefer madness is the same. And the reason things are a gateway drug, like reefer, is you go, oh, they were totally lying about
They were
every
lying
part of
about
it.
reefer.
I wonder
Now
what other
else?
great drugs they're lying about. So that's how it becomes a gateway.
So because of this debacle, it became much more difficult to get GHB, and many leading integrative doctors at the time were disgusted with the FDA as they saw how much GHB benefited their patients and treated a variety of immensely challenging illnesses. For example, one of my somewhat renowned colleagues is fairly left-wing and reflexively denies the notion any type of coordinated conspiracy could ever exist.
What about Russiagate?
But even he is outraged over what happened with GHB and believes the stories of GHB rapes were a complete hoax. Since GHB is easy to synthesize, and it essentially allows people to become drunk without the hangover while simultaneously functioning as an effective aphrodisiac, it became very popular in the rave scene, where to some extent it is still used.
Oh, so I can still get it?
People make it themselves.
But I have to go to a rave?
Yeah. Or go to Door Alley.
The rave. Oh, maybe they misprinted rave. They took the V out and put a P by mistake, and that was the problem. It's
maybe.
a rave drug.
Likewise, since some patient populations who are dealing with significant challenges due to post-PTSD find GHB greatly helps them, I periodically hear of them finding a way to get it. So I'll stop there. There's more to this article. You should go read it over at Substack, a Midwestern doctor.
That's better than
Somebody
human growth
provided
hormone.
the link.
I didn't know it
So
does.
there's a link in the chat if you want to go. But that's exactly that. So how this started in the 90s,
and that's
so
why
this
we still
isn't
use
new.
oil, and that's why we still use all these things.
And
that
you know,
suck.
I bet you there's going to be we're going to find out. I bet the Midwestern doctor is going to find out. Hey, you know, there was a cancer drug that they got rid of. I bet you any
You
money.
think just one?
I bet you, right?
You think just one?
I bet you any money.
If you trust anything from a government agency, you are such a jerk off.
Such a fucking jerk off.
It's unbelievable.
So they did it.
And
They
these
did
are
it.
people that know.
They did it. So all the sleep medicine now is garbage. It doesn't give you restorative sleep. So this idea that Donald Trump is going to take your democracy away from you is a joke.
Fuck off.
Is
He's
a
gonna
joke.
take our democracy.
You don't live in a
Take
democracy.
it.
You have your whole life. You haven't lived in a democracy.
Go look up what it means.
Your whole life.